I'm ready to go. Tell me when. Hey, everybody, this is Al. We're here in Philadelphia. Where else would we be? We once went to New York. Wow, that was complicated.
Yeah, that sucked. Let's not do that.
And we went to Washington, D.C. last year. And wow, that was complicated. Next year, we're going to Michigan because John Womack is inviting us. What town are you from, John? Can you give John a portable mic? John Womack is here in the room at the Kelly Writers House in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and he came all the way from Michigan for this. John, please put the mic up to your mouth and tell me why the heck you came all this way to see us.
Why, Al, you invited me.
I did.
You said, come
but
on
I invite
down.
a lot of people. Not everybody comes.
But I'm just visiting the East Coast, so I thought I'd stop in
Oh.
here and see you guys.
Fantastic. That's great. It's
Right.
so strange and disorienting to be hosting a... No, you're great. You're not strange and disorienting. It's so great to be hosting, so strange to be hosting a global course and then see John Womack in the forums this week, and then there he is. Anyway, thank you.
You guys
John.
are doing a fantastic job, by the way. It's a great class.
Thank you, John. I hope sometime in the next hour you'll do your thing. We'll ask you a question. We have here in the room, besides John Womack, who came all the way from Michigan. By the way, snaps for John Womack from Michigan? Okay. We have Janice and Nelson, who I think are both here for the first time, or second? First time. Andrea. Michael's here, although he's squirreled away in a corner doing a sketch from a... Zach, can we get Michael's unusual angle on the sketching? We have Mary here. Hi, Mary. Great to see you. He's already sketching. What are you doing? Who are you sketching? Is that John Womack?
The audience.
Okay. We have Mary here, one of our wonderful CTAs, and John and Kirby, and Dave Bender is here. Hello, Dave. And we have at the table Lily Applebaum.
Hello.
And Caroline is here, and Caroline is going to help me look at forum questions.
Yes.
Hello, Caroline.
Hello.
Thank you for doing that Richmond meetup.
It was great.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
It's so amazing. And Carlos.
Hey.
Hello, Carlos. And we have a kind of a record turnout here, not quite a record, but I see Allie Castleman from New York. Hello, Allie. I'm not hearing Allie. Zach? All right, Chris and Zach are going to figure that one out. Allie, we didn't hear you, but your mouth was moving, and that's good. Emily Harnett in New Haven, can we hear you?
I hope so.
That's terrific. And I believe, I see Erica there. Hello, Erica. It looks like from your room, you're upstate.
I sure am upstate,
Okay,
but at
great.
least I'm home.
You are home, it's good, not in your office.
Nope.
And Molly is here from Los Angeles. Hello, Molly.
Hello.
Hey, and I believe we have Dave and Max joining us as well a little later. Okay, let's check Allie's sound again. Hi, Allie.
Just figuring it out.
Nothing? No? Oh, Allie is mute tonight. Okay, and we have Anna Strong here, who's on the phone, 215-573-9752, 215-573-9752, and we have Jason, who has the portable mic, and we're really ready to get into Chapter 9.1, the first of 3 chapters in 3 weeks in Chapter 9, which is a kind of a three-pronged and not entirely random, but not complete survey of sort of, we'll call it founding contemporary poetry movements. And I know this is relatively difficult stuff, at least the ideas are, but we're game to talk about it. So give us a call. The second caller is going to get a copy of Julia Block's previous book, Letters to Kelly Clarkson. Second caller gets this wonderful book. And while I've got the camera close, Zach, I'm going to shout out to T, who made these cards last year or the year before, and I love them, and I'm just happy. And they're in my office all the time, T. This one says, "Do the work." Poetry nerd and proud. Carlos, that's going to be for you. When I retire, you get my stacks. Urge and urge and urge. Where's that from?
Whitman.
Walt Whitman. That's a great line. Urge and urge and urge. What's this one say? The how of what you say is what you say. That's not actually what I said.
I would trust T. I don't know.
You trust T.
It was the how
Trust
of what
me,
you said.
let's face it. Oh, here, and look what it is. It's birds on a wire. Is that a reference to the blackbird? Where do we get birds on a wire, though? Yeah, it's a Jim Croce or something like that.
No, Leonard Cohen.
Leonard Cohen, even better. This will be the last one. Go home, read lunch poems, hunker down. She didn't say jack off there. It's a clean card. Anyway, thank you, T. You're great. Okay, enough shouting out. Let's get some questions. I believe there was a tweet question. Anna?
Yeah, it was from Jennifer Pryor. She says, hi from San Francisco, looking forward to tonight's webcast. Hi, Jennifer.
Hey, Jennifer.
But then she writes, new to the language poets, help me with the theme of enumerative constraint, 100 sentences, 5 words, 37 chapters, etc.
Okay.
Good question.
Yeah, who wants to take a stab at that? Emily Harnett, I don't know if you heard the question. We're getting a question from San Francisco, from Jennifer. Is it Jennifer? Why do these poets go in for these seemingly arbitrary constraints? 100 sentences, Lynn Haginian, 38 years, 38 sentences. Any guess at that, Emily Harnett?
Yeah, just these constraints impose a certain form that allow poets to explore writing in different ways as a substitute for the more traditional forms that we generally don't really encounter in places like ModPo.
Aha, good answer. Erica, can you take a stab at this? Why seemingly arbitrary constraints? And the constraint of Albany, 100 sentences, each supposedly personal and political, it sounds arbitrary, but it also sounds kind of capacious at the same time. It almost doesn't sound limiting. Why do this?
Well, I think that because the constraints are constraints that the poets themselves built for themselves, it's more of the kind of constraint that's generative for the poet. So while it might seem arbitrary for us, that's the vessel that enables the work to happen.
Yeah. And behind what you're saying, or maybe right on the top of it, but I misheard how much on the top it was, is the idea that these are forms. They're not throwing forms away, but they're creating forms, setting themselves a task, and then completing the task. And the Chapter 9.2 poets do this in a way, because they set up their chance operations, and the Chapter 9.3 poets do it in a big way. Christian Buck, Eunoia. Does anybody want to just quickly describe as a preview to Chapter 9.3 what Eunoia does, Caroline?
In each chapter, he constrains himself to one vowel.
Right, so the Chapter A chapter uses words only with the vowel A, no other vowels.
Right.
That's quite a constraint. Lily, you want to take a stab at this really great question? Is it really freeing to pick your own form and then go with it?
Yeah, I mean, I would, as an exercise just to anyone, because I think a big part of language poetry is that, like, a poet doesn't have to be a big, celebrated, genius person who, like, is has, like, a really high status. It can be, you can write about your daily life and can sort of be anyone telling your own autobiography or writing an autobiography collectively, whatever that can mean. So therefore I think it's, fine to say to anyone, assign yourself 2 tasks. One, write a poem, and the other one, write a poem comprised of 100 sentences and see which one you write faster, or that comes more easily to your pen, I would say. Yeah,
and so Bernadette Mayer's experiments are going to be exactly what you described, and your comment implied that this was, you didn't say the word democratic, but it's a word worth using, right? The idea that Bernadette Mayer truly believes, she was in this room last year saying this on a ModPo webcast, if you create an experiment, you constrain yourself to do something, then you can do it. You really can do it. Am I pushing too far to say it's democratic?
No, I think it's, pulling in what Emily said about traditional forms, those traditional forms could be construed as more elitist because they require knowing things like what a in modern times, knowing what something like a strophe is, or like knowing how to count meter and whatever. It requires a certain type of education to know what that is. But to just say I'm going to write 100 sentences, or to say I'm 38 years old, I'm going to write one sentence for every year I was alive. Those are constraints that anyone can relate to and anyone can use and choose to adopt or not.
I want to turn to Molly. Molly, when we think about Ron Silliman's prose poem Bart, the constraint is not obvious in the writing, but this was a huge constraint. Do you want to take a minute to describe Bart as a constraint? Good luck.
Well, I think it functions on a couple of different levels. There are a couple constraints in Bart, one being that he's on the subway, so he's in a certain place. He's writing only while he is experiencing this train ride. Another one being the number of hours that he's on the train, which I think was 5.5 or something.
Right.
The idea that it was Labor Day could be a constraint in itself, because there's
he waited months for Labor Day and then he did it.
Right. There's a certain subset of people who are traveling on Labor Day, and so that gives him a special, flavor of experience that he couldn't have at any other time or place.
Yeah. Thank you so much. We're going to take a question from the forums by Layla Hughes, and I'm going to ask Jason and Carlos, and then somebody whom Jason will put a mic in front of. Ooh, we've never done that quite. To respond to Layla. Layla is 13 years old, and she is, so that would be middle school, I guess.
Wait, what? She's 13?
Yeah, Layla Hughes is 13, yeah.
She's homeschooled.
She's homeschooled.
Wow.
I think she's homeschooled. Actually, at the end, did she? At the end, I'm going to shout out to Layla and say a little more about Layla. But yes, she is, and she's participating each week in the, is it the homeschool or the young people thread each week? So anyway, Layla writes, and this is a 28-year-old or a 55-year-old saying this it's kind of question that's very mature. She says, and Jason, you'll be the first crack at it, and then Carlos. Lately, I've been seeing a lot of posts about people not being able to connect with the poem in any way, shape, or form. Thus, a general question that it would be nice to hear a few handy thoughts on. What should you do when you don't connect with a poem? What is a good way to start heading towards understanding? And Jennifer Pryor from San Francisco, who's not only tweeting, but she's here in this thread, says, yes, I agree. I'm really struggling to connect with these language guys. Jason, this is a tough question. Can you give Layla and Jennifer, specifically in terms of the language poets, what do we do when we don't seem to connect to this? Some people accuse it of being cerebral. Some people accuse it of being unnecessarily disjunctive.
Well, it it is disjunctive, but I think that putting together Jennifer's question and Layla's question helps to think about what the language poets are doing, what's happening in the course of one of their poems. And so we can think of, I think that Jennifer asked specifically about enumerative constraint. And one thing to think about is the way in which language itself is constrained and limited. I mean, the first thing I would do if you can't get a language poem is to put yourself back in second grade, or before that, kindergarten or nursery school, and try to just recite the alphabet and how many letters are there. There are how many? 26.
26.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Al.
Well, you were putting yourself back there, so.
Sure, I forgot. I was going to say 24.
There's some we don't need.
But as well, there are constraints in life. How many words will you speak in your life is a constraint, or what will you hear next is something you can't predict. So I think that trying to think about language itself as this very limited material that our communication is mostly constrained to think about the way a particular poem is pausing or is moving from statement to statement in a way that is as unpredictable as the language we use in our life, rather than the idea that a normal printed page of text gives us, that language is a clear and consistent and predictable linear thing.
Wow. What you said, aside from being characteristically brilliant, is something we're going to learn more and more as we go to the subsequent parts of Chapter 9, which is to say, more and more these works are more like the way the world is, or the way life is, ambient language. Language is just out there, and less like the predictable the sonnet, for instance, which is not at all like life, right? So, yeah, that's one way to do it. I don't know if Layla is clicking her heels over that, because I think she was that answer, which I loved, because here she is asking about she wants to connect. And frankly, Layla, and we're going to turn to Carlos, and while I'm turning to Carlos, I want you to pick someone randomly who seems like they can answer this question. Whoa, I can't wait to see who you pick. Yes, I forgot what I was going to say. Carlos, how would you answer? Oh, I know. The choices that I made originally 4 years ago when we created the ModPo syllabus were choices in favor of poems that I thought people could connect to, as opposed to many language poets' poems that wouldn't seem to be that immediately. For instance, Chronic Meanings, which once you learn that it's an elegy or pre-elegy, and you get the constraint, which is he's going to stop himself after 5 words, then, I mean, I once asked Bob Froman whether this was kind of a trick. He didn't like that term, but it's sort of something you can only do once. The idea of cutting off a line to be commensurate with the cutting off of life. That's something you should be able to connect to, as opposed to other language poets where you can't. My Life by Lyndon Ginian has this fabulous memoiristic mode about it. And there are recognizably things about this American girlhood in there, and Ron Silliman's Albany too. So we tried to create, and Charles Bernstein's poem is a post 9/11 poem, so there is that hook. So in a way, these are kind of easy, Layla, relatively easy. So I tried to make it so that we could connect, but if you don't, we need to deal with that. Carlos, how do you deal with it?
So I'm not sure if I'm going to directly answer her question, but one of the themes I find in these language poets is this idea of the self, the person, the poet, and the poem as a host of narratives. And so, you know, in a life, there
a host
are
of narratives.
A host of
Carlos.
narratives. So, you know, you have moments or memories or experiences that kind of collage themselves over the course of a life, or you as a person sort of go through changes throughout your life. And I feel like these poems, especially I'm thinking of Albany, but also with My Life and these other pieces, I think attempt to instead of follow a linear narrative,
Mhm.
like we've been touching on, they try to
Yeah.
be more realistic in that they mirror this sense of a host of
Right.
narratives.
And the key here is that it's more realistic. We're saying it's more realistic, but it feels to a novice reader like it's less realistic, and I think that's the sticking point. Who has the microphone? I want you to finish. Oh, absolutely. John Womack from Michigan gets the
Michigan.
mic. Carlos wants to finish
Yeah.
first, John.
No, so I mean, I might say my advice would be to, like with any poem, just take time with it, step back from it,
Mhm.
and maybe focus less on trying to find a linear narrative and just, not even taking it line by line, but kind of zooming out, looking at the big picture of the poem.
Good. So, John Womack, how do you want to deal with that question? Did you volunteer for this, or did Jason just give it to you?
He picked me.
Okay.
I would advise her to maybe look at these poets and how they have set constraints on what they were doing, whether it be so many words, or if they're just going to run it together into what looks like a prose, and maybe try to do it with your own life. Set a constraint for yourself. Say, okay, I'm going to write only 5 words or 7 words and 30 sentences, and do it, and put it in terms of your own life. At 13 years old, for me, that's going back many moons. I look at these poets. The one that wrote at 37 was when she wrote it. I'm not sure how old Ron Silliman is, but much more world experience and things to write about.
Yeah.
So a lot of the things he writes about are coming from his life, from a slice of his history.
Yeah.
So if she were to maybe set a constraint for herself like they have done, and then write it from her own experience, she may, understand a little better.
Really cool. John Womack. Once again, some snaps for John Womack. I want to put out the number. I want to test Allie's snapping. I want to test Allie's mic in a second. 215-573-9752. 215-573-9752. Please call us. Allie, can we test your mic? No, we don't have Allie. Do you want to try to reconnect? Zach, do we have a suggestion for Allie? Chris? Make sure your mic is unmuted, etc. There's Max.
Hey, look at that.
Hello, Max.
Hi, Al.
Hey, can you travel to New York and fix Allie's microphone, please?
Yeah, sure. Let me get in a high-speed train.
Good evening, Max. So I want to play just a second or two, or 10 seconds or so, from Lynn Haginian's reading of the section of my life when she's 4 to 5 years old, because something that Jason said made me think that Lynn Haginian is the right way to approach this problem. So here it is, and I'm going to ask Caroline and Emily just to respond in any way you want to this question of how we would read my life, which is a text I think a lot of people use in freshman college classes, really as an alternative memoir, alternative autobiography. How would this work? How could Layla and others get into it? So here's Lynn Haginian, and this is quite early. This is actually before the book was published, so it's a very young Lynn Haginian.
What is the meaning hung from that depend? A dog bark, the engine of a truck, an airplane hidden by the trees and rooftops. My mother's childhood seemed a kind of holy melodrama. She ate her pudding in a pattern, carving a rim around the circumference of the pudding.
It was wonderful.
Is she really 13, do you think?
Yeah, I don't know if I believe you're 13, Layla.
She's probably a teacher.
And we told her, it was like, you're not missing out on high school pedagogy for poetry. I was like, stay homeschooled. I begged to be homeschooled.
You did yourself?
Yes, because I was so bored in my English classes. I was like, the only thing you're missing is a very misconstrued portrait of Emily Dickinson in an attic with no friends. I was like, keep homeschooling.
Is it possible that the Teacher Resource Center can be a node for parents and not just teachers, parents who are homeschooling their kids, at least in this area? Obviously, they'd need a couple of other subject matters, not just poetry.
I think so.
Yeah,
I think that we
I think
could
so
add,
too.
yeah.
That would be really cool. Well, thank you, Layla. And finally, just from the voicemail, Deborah Josephson will go out with Deborah. We'll listen to Deborah, and we'll say goodnight. I just want to make sure I thank everybody. Those who came, John Womack, all the way from Michigan, yeah. Janice, Nelson, Brian, Andrea, Michael, drawing, he's already finished. Mary, John, Kirby, Dave Bender, Erica. Hello, Erica, thank you. Thanks for coming tonight. Allie didn't make the audio connection, so she left. Emily has gone. And there's Dave Poplar, though. Thanks, Dave. Carlos, Caroline, and Lily, thank you so much. And Anna Strong, who was waiting for me to forget here. All right, we're going to... And Jason, too. And, of course, these two guys over here, Chris and Zach, once again, miracle workers. Total miracle workers. Okay, so we'll let Deborah Josephson, whatever she's going to say. This was 512-95-ModPo, 512-95-ModPo. And here's Deborah.
Hi, it's Deborah Josephson, and I'm from Burbank, California. And as you know, I've never called in. I've been too shy. So thank you for this. This is great. It's my 4th year with ModPo, or 2nd year with ModPo Plus. And I'd like to say, Julia Block, I really love listening to you lead the open readings. It's a privilege to be able to participate with you, and I really hope you record more and more. This is a great opportunity, and I'm grateful. I feel that way about everyone. Each voice is fantastic. But I really want to acknowledge Julia. I feel as if I were a young poet instead of an old one. I'd come to Penn to be your students, so you're very special. And the other thing that I wanted to say is I was catching up on the webcast, and wow, I think what makes this style of teaching so fantastic, this open, non-lecture style, is that it's a way of life and not just a college technique for learning. ModPo makes poetry a community experience and a spoken and shared one where every voice counts, and we just keep growing and growing. And that's art, creativity, and learning as a way of life, and anyone can do it. Poetry is the trigger, and I think this is revolutionary, and the difference is spreading.
Wow, that was really great. I hope Deborah's listening, but let's give her a big hand for that. That was fantastic. And so we're going out with T's reminder. Zach? There it is. T says do the work, and when T says do the work, you'd better do the work. 9.1, the rest of this week, please catch up, and then we'll start on 9.2. And we didn't tell you this yet, but we're writing essays next week, which is crazy. And then in week 10, we're going to be peer reviewing them again. So anyway, thank you, everybody, and good night, and we'll see you next week.